Hey guys, Brother Samedini here. I've been going over your lab worksheets for the blood lab, and there's just something I wanted to touch on. Something a lot of people seem to be kind of confused about. I want to talk about before you take your physiology exam this weekend. So when we're doing blood typing, so these are 4 different red blood cells. We're going to call this one type A, type B, type AB, and this is going to be our O blood. So first, I just want to clarify what it means when we're talking about blood being A, B, AB, or O. So on our red blood cells, and kind of like on every protein that we have little, or every cell, we have little proteins that stick off. Sometimes these are purposely used for identification. Sometimes they're just there. But anyway, we call these little proteins antigens. So the antigens are the things that are stuck to the red blood cells. So we're going to have the antigens, and then basically we're going to have other things in our blood, like antibodies and stuff, that are going to bind to these different antigens, so then they can recognize either this is my own cell or they recognize this as a foreign cell. So for our type A blood, I'm just going to draw this as kind of a cartoon. So all our antigens here are our type A antigens. Our type B blood has, you guessed it, type B antigens. Type AB blood has both A and B antigens. And our type O blood has none of those antigens. So what does that mean? Well, so a person with type A blood, okay, so these people, they're going to produce things called antibodies, which hopefully you learned about. We're going to draw them as these little Ys. Basically, an antibody has this little Y shape. This is our binding domain. It's going to be complementary with some kind of antigen. It's going to bind to something. So your body makes antibodies against things that are foreign to it. So it's like, hey, this isn't part of my own blood. I'm going to make these antibodies so it'll bind to those things, cause them to clump together, and then your body can recognize this thing's covered with antibodies. I need to kill it and get rid of it. So type A blood, since they don't have any of these B antigens, they're going to make B antibodies. So this won't bind to the A antigen, but it will bind to a B antigen. The B blood, that's going to create A antibodies. So again, it's an A antibody. These are B antigens. They're not complementary, so this won't bind to itself. But if we had an A blood cell in there, this would bind to that. Our type AB blood, since it has both A and B antigens, it's not going to create either of those. It's not going to create either of these antibodies because that would bind to itself, and that would be silly. We don't want that to happen. Our type O blood, since it doesn't have any antigens, it's going to create antibodies against both of them. So we're going to have A and B antibodies. And again, since we don't have the antigens, it's not going to bind to itself, but if we were to have blood from any of these other people, this antibody would come over here, and it would bind to that antigen. And when we get a bunch of those, that's what's going to cause the red blood cells to clump together. It's going to make it so your macrophages identify it, and then they can kill it. So when we're doing our blood typing in lab, and you did your finger prick, we put your blood in, mix it with the serum. That serum had antibodies in it. So like in the little trough with A, if you saw that clumping, which hopefully you all got to see what that looked like, we have those, it's all, this has lots of clumps in it. That means that the A antibodies were binding to something on the blood. So that meant you had the A antigens. That's how you know you have type A blood. If you didn't have the antigen, the antibodies have nothing to bind to. There's no clumping. And that's how you know you're, I guess, negative for A. You don't have that type. Okay, so hopefully that kind of makes sense for those. The other thing to add is positive and negative. So when we're doing our blood type, the A, B, AB, or O, that's referring to these antigens, and then the positive or minus at the end, that's just referring to what we call our D antigen or our Rh factor, or anyway, however you want to call it. So I'll draw it as an Rh, just recognize it's also called a D. So if this is A positive, what that positive means is that we're positive we do have the Rh antigen. So in addition to all these A's, we're also going to have an Rh on it. So A positive blood has two types of antigens on it. If this B blood, if this is B negative blood, that means the negative means we test negative for the Rh factor. So we do have B antigens, and that tells us we don't have Rh antigens. So in that case, this type of blood is only going to have B's on it. And again, if we're AB, and if we're negative for Rh, that means our body can produce the antibodies for Rh. So if we're exposed to something with a Rh antigen, our body can create tons of these antibodies to take it out. If we're AB, let's make this AB negative. So for AB negative, we don't have any of the Rh antigens, and we are going to have the antibodies for it. So a person with AB negative blood, can they receive blood from someone with B negative blood? Think about it for just a second. And the answer is yes. So when we're checking to see if we can do a transfusion, look at the donor blood and then look at the recipient's antibodies is kind of one way to look at it. Basically, you can't introduce anything new to the recipient's blood. So if someone's AB negative, you can give them things with A's on it, you can give them things with B's on it, but since they're negative for Rh, you can't give them anything with Rh. So it's B negative blood, totally fine. We only have B antigens. There's nothing that these Rh antibodies are gonna bind to. Can a person with AB negative blood receive A positive blood? Think about it. No, they cannot. And the reason for that is, so AB negative, so we're adding A, which this person already has A. They don't have any A antibodies down here. So that part's fine, but this positive, they're Rh positive, this person's Rh negative, that would be adding something new. They're going to create antibodies against it, and we're going to have a transfusion reaction, which is bad. So an AB negative cannot receive from AB positive. We'll flip it the other way. Can AB positive receive from AB negative? The answer to that is no. So, and the reason for that is this person has A antigens. That's not, so these A's aren't going to cause any problems. But this person produces B antibodies. Those would bind to the B antigens on the donated blood. We're fine as far as the Rh factor goes, but that B makes it a no-go. So we'll make this one, if this is an O, first we'll make it an O negative blood. So if this is O negative, that means we have no A antigens, no B antigens, and then that negative means we have no Rh antigens. So that's like basically our smooth, naked red blood cell right there. So if this person was O negative, that means they would also have Rh antibodies down here. O negative is the universal donor. Because this red blood cell has no antigens on it, you can give it to any other blood type without having any transfusion reactions. The reason for that is there's no antigens on it. None of these antibodies are going to bind to it. Because this person is O negative, though, they can only receive blood from other individuals with O negative blood. The reason for that is they have no antigens, but they have all of the antibodies. They have A, B, and Rh antibodies. So if we give them any other type of blood other than O negative, if they have any kind of antigen sticking off of it, these are going to bind to it. It's going to cause clumping. They're going to have an immune response. We're going to have a bad transfusion reaction. Misconception some of you guys have had is it seems like in the worksheet some of you think that we're looking at we're not looking at the donated antibodies. When they take someone's blood, they're going to take it and they're going to do what's called a spin and wash. So they're going to spin the blood and they're going to basically let it settle. So you have your red blood cells come down at the bottom and then your serum's going to stay up at the top. That's going to have mostly antibodies. They're going to take that out. So you're giving them pretty much just red blood cells. So the donor isn't giving them the antibodies. So we're not going to have a reaction that way. And if you are in the case where, say, we have an O negative individual who needs blood, doctor's like, we need O negative blood like right now, and you're donating super fast, you have someone in the other room, you're drawing blood out of them. Even if you were to give them blood with the antibodies in it, they're small enough in number. You got like 5 liters you have about 5 liters of plasma in your body of that fluid. And so you're giving them like 2 pints of blood. So the amount of antibodies that would be in the blood is super small. So we're not really going to cause any issues there. It's mostly just a matter of if we're introducing antigens that the person's immune system is going to recognize and then and create antibodies against and destroy. So hopefully that helps make a little bit more sense. The other thing I want to note on, I'm making comments on the blood lab, but on the one about the blood lipid profile, something most everybody missed on that question is you need to make a distinction between a male or a male and a female patient. It gives you some values. It doesn't tell you if the patient is a male or a female. And especially for the high density lipoproteins, your HDLs, though what's considered a normal range is different for a man versus a woman. For example, I think the thing had it as you had 41 was your HDL levels. If you have a female patient, then that's low because theirs is supposed to be above 50. But for a male patient, their range it's supposed to be above 40. So you want to make sure you know those values, look at the gender differences, look at on hematocrit as well. Make sure you know what's a normal hematocrit range, again, for a male versus a female, because there are some differences there. Good luck on the exam this weekend. Hope you do well, and email me if you have any questions. Thanks, guys.